So I saw Toy Story 5 opening night, Friday 7:30 in IMAX at Regal Deer Park, which, by the way, is inside a mall I almost never go to, but it's actually a really nice mall. And they have an IMAX there. This was actually my second IMAX movie at that theater. My first time was 2 years ago for The Brutalist. I'm pretty sure they redid the seats in the last year or two because they recline now, which is pretty rare. That's actually something most IMAX theaters around here don't do. I know Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn does the reclining seats, but it's not that common. Anyway, not why we're here. I also recently saw Masters of the Universe in 4DX at that same theater, so it's been a busy summer at Regal Deer Park, but we're talking about Toy Story 5, and I really, really liked it. I want to start here, actually, because, the crowd was really good. 7:30 on a Friday opening night, this theater was packed. I was pretty shocked at how full it was. But it was, made me really happy because it wasn't just parents dragging their kids to something they didn't care about. I was assuming, and I felt in the energy in the theater, these are parents who grew up with these movies. They were there for themselves just as much as they are for their kids. There was something just really sweet about that. It didn't feel like Disney exercising its will on the marketplace. It felt like heart, like something people actually wanted to be there for. So if we look at the, original Toy Story films, the first three are the main trilogy. Everyone says that, That's the unit. Toy Story 1, 2, and 3 form one of the most complete arcs in animation history, maybe in film history, period. Toy Story 3 got a Best Picture nomination. I was in 3rd or 4th grade when that movie came out, and I remember watching it at school and being emotional and reading the comic book. There was a comic book that I got at like a Rite Aid or a Walgreens to accompany the movie. It just told the movie story. The incinerator scene really got me going. The scene where Andy goes to college, that's a movie. And people are already saying, Toy Story 5 shies away from going to that level of darkness. And they're right, but we'll get to that. Toy Story 4 came out, and honestly, I barely remember it. I know it was set at a fair or carnival. I know Duke Kaboom was in it, voiced by Keanu Reeves, who I actually thought was going to be the villain. Kind of like how they teased Lotso and Up before Toy Story 3. I think he was in Incredibles 2. Like in Jack's crib, an action figure, so I thought that. I remember Forky, the spork that came to life because Bonnie glued googly eyes on it, and the whole philosophical question was, what actually makes a toy? And I just didn't think that was enough of an idea to justify Toy Story 4 after such a great original trilogy. The movie ended with Woody leaving the group, and the fact that I can barely reconstruct the plot tells me everything I need to know. It felt like a spinoff that happened to have the main cast in it. I didn't even see Lightyear. I thought that was an interesting concept, but, moving on. Toy Story 5 is better than 4, significantly better. I'll say that, The central idea here is great, and I think it's, the strongest the franchise has had since the original trilogy. Bonnie's parents buy her a tablet, a frog-shaped, AI-powered tablet named Lilypad, voiced by Greta Lee, and almost immediately, Bonnie starts spending all her time on it, playing games, messaging her dance school friends, because here's the thing, all the other kids in Bonnie's world already have tablets. Her parents got her one so she wouldn't look out of place. And so, the toys now, Jessie, Woody, Buzz, the whole gang suddenly find themselves watching this kid they love drift away from them in real time. Now, compare this to what Toy Story 1 was about. What happens when a cooler toy replaces you? That was the Buzz and Woody story. Toy Story 5 is doing the same thing, but scaled up to an entire cultural moment. It's not only one toy replacing another toy, it's technology replacing the entire concept of toys. That's a bigger idea, and for a 5th film, it is impressive. I work with kids. I've been around 9-year-olds who play with iPads, but I've also been around kids who still have toys. So the question the movie is asking, what age do kids stop playing with toys, and what does that mean, is something, I found myself thinking about. Another thing that works is this is not a Woody and Buzz movie. They're in it that, they matter, but this is Jessie's story. Joan Cusack is the lead here, and I was thinking, is this a choice so they don't have to pay Tom Hanks more voice lines? But honestly, this is a really smart choice, and it works for the story. There's actually something, this franchise hasn't really done since Toy Story 2, which was all the way back in 1999, and it first introduced her character. The film sends Jessie and Bullseye to Emily's old house, Emily being Jessie's original owner, the girl from the When She Loved Me sequence in Toy Story 2. That's a great callback. And at Emily's house, Jessie discovers a whole collection of forgotten tech toys. Smarty Pants, a digital potty trainer voiced by Conan O'Brien. Snappy, a camera toy voiced by Shelby Rabara. And Atlas, a phone map toy voiced by Craig Robinson. These are funny characters. The joke where Lilypad looks up Jessie and goes, "Oh, you're a vintage cowgirl doll." Like, that's funny. There's a lot of good stuff here that I think kids will like and, adults will like. I'm an adult. I really thought it was great at balancing those two things. There's also a girl named Blaze, played by Michelle Harris, and Jessie decides almost immediately that Blaze would be the perfect friend for Bonnie. The whole second half of the movie is essentially the toys working across tech and new tech to engineer a playdate between these two kids. And the animators did extraordinary work. There really is a moment in here that I felt as a whole is kind of unnecessary, but it's like the animation. There's a scene with the animals where you just can tell. A lot of people compare the original dog in Sid's dog in the 1995 Pixar film and say, that it's incredible how much the animation's changed. And they usually, I remember in 2019, we're comparing it to the cat in Toy Story 4. And it's similar here. Everything looks beautiful. It's really, really great. And I want to talk about the villain now, because all Pixar villains have been real. I always, as a kid, thought a movie hinged on that. You had Sid in the first one, Prospector in the second one, and Al. So you had kind of two human villains and then a toy villain. It was very good. And then the third had Lotso, which, was my childhood, Disney villain. I thought he was great. This movie walks a fine line with Lily Pad. She's not a cartoon villain. She's not evil. She cares about Bonnie. She wants Bonnie to fit in with her peers, to not be the weird kid playing with toys. And that's, one of the more interesting things I think the movie does, because it doesn't let you just hate her. At a certain point, when Bonnie gets bullied on an online game called The Pond, girls literally start a game of hide and seek and they forget to look for Bonnie. Lily Pad is upset by this, and she throws herself onto a donation truck. She's sacrificing herself because she feels responsible. You didn't expect to feel something for the iPad, but here we are. I kind of was thinking there's no way this movie leans. In 2026, it's very hard, especially with a Toy Story movie, I feel, to lean into a cartoonishly absurd villain. You could, but the angle they're going with, these toys who are just trying to help Bonnie, it wouldn't really make sense. I think it's a smart move the movie makes. As a kid, maybe I would have been like, they should have made the Lily Pad evil. But, I think it's a very good story. It made me really appreciate this movie more. The other side of this is Woody and Buzz trying to shut Lily Pad out, literally unplugging her charger to drain her battery overnight. It's petty and it's funny, and it's also exactly what these toys would do. And the parallel opening with 50 commemorative Buzz Lightyear action figures stranded on an island, convinced they need to find Star Command. That's some of the best stuff in this movie. The Buzzes eventually reveal they could transform into drones, and they fly everyone to safety in the third act. There's something about 50 Buzzes that is, it's hilarious, but also the callback to the original Buzz not knowing if he was a toy, now scaled to an army of them all going through it together. It works really well. And another thing Toy Story 5 does very well is use its ensemble. Mr. Potato Head, Mr. Prickle Pants, Ducky, and Bunny, Forky, everyone gets moments without any of them overstaying their welcome. I get that, major characters like the ones I just mentioned have to kind of take, a back step to let the new people in. It is a very, very solid movie, especially for one that I originally was just like, did they really need to fucking make this? How many of these have they made? They don't need the money, although it's a money printing machine. But I do have to be honest, the movie is very, very close to being great. It's not quite there. I think the reason is structural. In order to get to its resolution, which is, warm, which is earned, the movie has to do a certain amount of, old man yells at the cloud, tech is bad, iPad is stealing Bonnie's time, childhood is dying. And I get it, the movie is for families. It needs to set up the conflict in terms kids and parents can both read. But it does mean that before you get to the nuanced conclusion, you spend some time in territory that feels a little thin. The scene where Lily Pad throws herself onto the donation truck, extends the movie by 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And for me, it slightly deflates the momentum. It replays a lot of the franchise's greatest hits without adding something new. Although it does, you get her helping with the buzzes, linking them up with the Wi-Fi. But, there's also a moment involving parents receiving messages from the toys that the movie just kind of waves away. Are Bonnie's parents not alarmed that their daughter's getting emails about lost toys at random addresses? Okay, I think this is a bit of a nitpick because the Toy Story franchise, itself requires a lot of just disbelief. It's a movie for kids. I'm aware of that. I'm just pointing it out. The movie is aware enough of this to have the mom go, oh, well, we'll go pick them up together, which is a deliberate non-answer. I'm willing to accept it because the movie earns that goodwill elsewhere, but it is a loose thread. And this gets to something broader. Pixar is fundamentally interested in making family films. That ceiling is real. The incineration, scene in Toy Story 3 got as dark as this franchise is ever going to get, and Toy Story 5 clearly isn't trying to match it. That's a choice, but it means this movie lives in the space of very good rather than the kind of film that changes how you think about animation. The Wild Robot came out 2 years ago, and I thought it was one of the only animated films in recent memory to work very well for everyone in the room, not just kids, for adults, just like, you know, a really great animated film. Spider-Verse also works very well. I love the Spider-Verse films. And then Flow, that Latvian animated film made in Blender that beat Inside Out 2 and The Wild Robot for Best Animated Feature. That film had no dialogue. It followed a cat through a post. I don't even need to talk about Flow. I don't think that's for kids. Those are films, though, that broke through what we expect animated movies to do. Toy Story 5 doesn't quite break through, but it's really, really good. You know, and it works beautifully within the lanes it's given. The ending got me more than I expected. Jessie finds closure not by, you know, staying with one child forever, but by understanding the ripple effect she's had across multiple kids' lives. To me, the fundamental question when you're making these movies is, how can you justify a sequel, and how can you tell a story that is inherently, it's been told before. They can make, you know, a dozen more Toy Story movies. It's going to be very hard as we go to stick close to the original formula and do something new. This is really, really good. Obviously, there are, you know, it's not great because it has the constraints, as we've mentioned. But I mean, I think this is a really solid sequel. You know, just from an animation standpoint, it looks absolutely beautiful. And the story is great, and it works for not only, you know, it works for its intended audience. That's the best part. You know, hearing families, kids, adults, grandparents in my theater, laughing, smiling, you know, little kids talking during scenes. You know, it didn't really matter. Usually I'd be like, shut up, shut the fuck up. No, but in a movie like this, you're everyone is in sync, and it's just a great movie to watch. I had a great time. Disney and Pixar did not disappoint. They've made some stinkers. I mean, Strange World, terrible. Hopper's really good. Didn't even see Lightyear. Then there's Wish, which is shit. But my point is, when they hit, they really make good movies. I thought Hopper's would just be this is the one original Disney idea. Toy Story 5 is also a really good idea, and it's, you know, been a IP for 30 years. So let's hope they make more good stuff like this. Thanks guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.